a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. One day right now in Alabama, little black boys and black girls will be able to join hands with little white boys and white girls as sisters and brothers. I have a dream.
Welcome to the Ambassador Podcast, a resource created by a community of Christians seeking to represent God to a watching world in humility, unity, and boldness. Our goal is to educate, be educated, encourage, be encouraged, challenge, and be challenged as we pursue a heavenward perspective of God's heart for racial equity and reconciliation rooted in the gospel of Jesus Christ.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ambassador Podcast. My name is Jared Cole, the host, and to my left here we have Purshia Gambles, and we're going to be doing stories, and we're looking forward to hearing yours. So go ahead and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name's Purshia Gambles, and I was born and raised in Lubbock, Texas. Usually when people think of Texas, they think of Houston or San Antonio or Dallas. Lubbock is none of those things. It's actually many, many hours away from whatever town you've heard of in Texas, usually. And
there's a university there?
There's a university
and
there.
What do they do?
Lubbock, Texas is home of the Red Raiders of Texas Tech University. Wreck 'em. Or as Jared says, guns.
That's right.
From here it's possible, you know. That's our motto.
Barbecue,
bumping country music, and Beyonce. That's what we're known for. No, but yeah, I love Texas so much, so much. I didn't know I was that type of person, like a everything's better in Texas person until I moved to Ames. And then I was like, no, like literally, I was literally one of those people that's like, oh, people really do be living other places. Like,
including Ames, Iowa.
And they like stay. Like people are born and raised and like stay here.
And it snowed?
It snowed. No, it was negative 30 degrees one day. I'm like, y'all choose to be here. Like, you don't have to, you don't have to do. But born and raised in Lubbock, Texas, and went to Texas Tech University, and then a year ago, last week, moved to Ames, Iowa, to work for a church here. And during the time I was a kid in Lubbock, I came to know Jesus at around 5 or 6, and I wouldn't have been able to articulate the gospel message perfectly, but I definitely think I knew that Jesus had died for my sins, and that meant that I could go to heaven.
Yep.
But about a year, maybe 2 years after that, I was molested by a family member, and that gave me a whole lot of mixed feelings about family and men and God, because I had the quintessential, even at like 7, 8 years old, had the quintessential question of, if God is real and he loves me this much and he exists, then why would he let this terrible thing happen to me? Especially by someone that I knew was supposed to protect me. Yeah. And so because I didn't know what to do with that, I didn't do anything with it for a really, really long time. And I really think it wasn't until like junior or senior year of high school, I started to really struggle with depression and anxiety really bad, because not necessarily because of that, but it was definitely fueled by that. As I approached like senior year of high school, like you're thinking about SATs, ACTs, like which school you're going to go to, and just like the stress of carrying the load of what happened to me in my childhood along with that, it proved to be too much for me to bear. And so I started to go to counseling and to therapy. And I think that was like the very first time for me to start to heal, start to cope, start to just start to deal with what happened to me when I was a kid. And it was the first time where I really felt God speak into that. It kind of felt like, of course, I don't believe this theologically, so don't hear me like that. But I really felt like God was saying to me, I don't want what happened to you when you were a kid to go into college with you weighing you down, you know, and So I got to heal in a way that unfortunately a lot of people, especially a lot of minorities, don't get to as victims of sexual abuse. And so I'm very grateful for that. And of course, like it's still a process even today, you know. But going to college and
so you were able to talk through that with somebody and how was that? I'm just curious, man. How was that process that first time? You know, take us back when you were able to receive that freedom, you know, first.
It was hard.
Yeah.
In many ways, it still is, you know. But I think that there was a part of me that just knew I have to do something. Like, I'm not going to make it if I don't do something. Like, I'm just too tired, you know, and stressed and sad and shameful all the time, you know. And I, of course, at 17, 18, I wouldn't have been able to articulate those things, but it was what I felt, you know. And so it would just start with like little things like the counselor, her name was Kim. She was really cool. Shout out to Kim if you ever hear this. She probably won't, but she would just start to ask me little like surfacey questions like, what do you see when you look in the mirror, or what makes you feel that way about yourself? And that would funnel into, well, this thing happened to me, you know, and that would go into much deeper conversations about like, well, who was this family member and like what's been done since and things like that. Like, but it started out really surface level because basically she was like a kid's counselor, you know, and so it usually starts pretty service level. And then when I came to college, I really do think that God proved faithful because college, going to Texas Tech, I really wanted to go to A&M, but I didn't get to. But going to Tech in my backyard, basically, was probably the biggest catalyst for formation, for sanctification, for acknowledgement of God and myself. Man, I could have never predicted what the 5 years that I was at Texas Tech University would have been like. But I'm so grateful for it because I began to understand not only did God love me no matter what, but he made it possible for me to know and love him through his son. And that was an immensely transformative truth for me because the way that I grew up, it was such a conditional love, you know, it was such you earn what affection you are given,
That's right.
You know, and so the fact that this God knows everything about me, past, present, and future, and still chooses me, that was like radical to me. And I think that it refueled like why I, you know, wanted to get an education, why I wanted to learn, why I wanted to develop relationships with people and things like that. It just started to really like redefine me, you know. And I remember when I was a junior, I was on this internship thing in Washington, D.C., and a friend of mine who had just graduated was about to go into seminary. And up to that point, I was like 19. So up until that point, I planned to go to law school and knew seminary was like ministry grad school, basically. But I remember her talking to this pastor that we knew in the area about his seminary education. And I remember secondhand overhearing their conversation and thinking that is more life-giving to me than anything I've ever thought about with law school. And so at that moment, it wasn't like, oh, I need to do ministry, but it was like, I'm probably not supposed to do law school. If like whatever this is, I like it way more.
They got it and I don't.
Yes, literally. It was just like, all right, something needs to change, you know. So I come back, and by this point, I'm really involved with this church called Redeemer in Lubbock, Texas. And I spoke to my college pastor at the time. His name was Richard. And I said, hey, like, this may be coming out of left field, but I really feel called to investigate or look into, pray about what ministry would look like for me. And he's like, okay, cool. When you get back, I was still in DC at the time, but when you get back, we'll talk about it. Get back, and he signed me up for a support raising class without telling me. And I remember getting to church that day, and I was like, hey, somebody signed me up for this support raising class. Like, whoever needs to know, like, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah.
And he was like, I signed you up. I think you should do our residency program.
Wow.
And I was like, what? That's probably like illegal. But he was like, I just think you should do ministry. I think you have a lot of strengths that will take you far in it. Or, it was just a very encouraging talk. And that was the first time that anyone really believed in me to that degree about something like that I wanted to like do. And so I remember that meant a whole lot to me. And then my mentor at the time was like, yes, Rashard's right. You really should do this. And so then came the talk with my mom. I don't know if this is clear.
She was just like, oh yeah, from the jump, right?
Yeah. That began this like really hard but really redemptive process of her learning more dimensions of who I am. Like I'm more than just my intelligence.
Wow.
And then also learning that like there's someone moving my life forward who's not just me. Like God is doing something in my life that not even I can quantify or control or describe, And from that moment, she just started to notice a shift in me, like genuine sanctification of like, I don't have to win every argument now. I can be wrong. Still working on that, but legitimately, like she just started to see me change, and that made her kind of see like, oh, like maybe she is supposed to like do this, And so support Raise for the first time ever, and do this 2-year residency program at Redeemer, and like post college, and this proves to be probably the biggest cement to me that like ministry is like what I feel called to be doing right now, or with my life even, because I'm just so fueled by getting to tell people about Jesus, because I think about all the ways that he has done things, in my life that I want anyone and everyone to know the God that I know.
Wow.
Not because of me, but because of him, And halfway through, right before I started the residency program, we came to Ames, Iowa for a conference, a college ministry conference. And up to that point, I thought Iowa, Ohio, and Idaho were all the same. They were synonymous to me. Like they were all like, okay,
so Tracy got a leg up on you.
She did. Like she knew which one it was. Like legit. She knew like, oh, that's the one. But I thought, okay, y'all make some kind of vegetable, and you're one of those states that's like square but not too square. Like I just knew it was one of those middle states. With a lot of vowels. And so come to Ames and just bowled over by the people, bowled over by the church itself. And but then again, just never think, like I just thought, oh, this is a cool conference. I'll never be back, So go back to Lubbock, do my residency. And then about 6 months before it's finished, I reached out to my now boss, because I was in between decisions, like what I would do after residency. And at the time, I thought seminary. Like I thought I was going to go to a school in Kentucky, like just go full time and then figure out after. And she was like, oh, that's really cool. We can, I just genuinely wanted advice. And she was like, that's really cool. That's a great opportunity. We can talk about it next week. But just so you know, when we do talk, I have an opportunity up here in Ames, like for you to think about. And up to that point, I didn't think anything like, I never thought I'd live, I never thought going to work at this church, or anything like that, let alone leaving the South, let alone leaving, Anyway, we talked, and she was like, you should come up here for a visit and just see what we're about, so you can get to know us, we can get to know you. And I said no. I said no, and then she said, you should pray about it some more. And even then I was like, how can you tell? I said no, like right. But
in most cases, no means no, but in the church, no means pray.
No means no means pray about it and talk to somebody wiser than me. And like, so took another 2 weeks to pray about it. And my head pastor at the time, my best friend and my mentor all said, go on the visit. The worst thing you can do is go on the visit and it still be a no. And go on the visit completely, again, like overwhelmed by the gift that is where I work, you know, now where I work now. And I remember on the last day of my visit, I was at the church service, and I remember sitting there thinking, am I supposed to move to Ames, Iowa? Like literally thinking that, and then immediate feeling like I feel like I am, and then being overwhelmed by sadness because that meant not only leaving the city that I'm from, that I've lived in for forever, you know, but then also leaving this church where I've really come to be deeply rooted there, you know, relationships, experiences, like just deep roots there. And so about 6 months later, moved to Ames, and I would say the rest is history. I work here now, live here now, looking for natural hair stores here now. But yeah.
That's right. That's good. That's good, man. Great story. Man, love that you're here. Excited to be ministry partners with you and excited to dive into this project, The Ambassador, with you as well. Go ahead and tell us a little bit, man, what's your heart for The Ambassador?
Yeah. I would say two things. One, the fact that God, through Jesus, through his son Jesus, grants us vertical reconciliation with him, you know, despite our sin, he gives us grace. But then he also grants us horizontal reconciliation with one another. And I think a life of fighting for reconciliation in any regard, but namely racial reconciliation, means showing, hey, we've been unified by the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. And this is what that means. And then, so that's one thing. Two, in the Bible, I think Micah 6:8 comes to mind, that we are called to do justice, love mercy, and humbly walk with our God.
That's right.
And I mean, that is my heartbeat for these things, you know, along with being like genuine, along with being Black myself. Like I want to do what God is passionate about.
That's
no
right.
one is more passionate about racial reconciliation than God is. No one's more long suffering in the process of getting it than God is. And so I think to walk in alignment with him is to walk in alignment with his heart for his people, you know? And so
that's good.
Wow. I could not say that better. But yeah, that's great, Frederick. Thanks for sharing your story.
that's that Texas education.
That's right.
Let's go.
Guns. Thank you for listening to the Ambassador Podcast. If you would like to hear more episodes or get more information about the Ambassador, please check out our website at www.weareambassador.com.